Gregg Popovich, the level of consistency that he has maintained throughout the years is nothing short of phenomenal. He is one of the top 5 greatest coaches in NBA history as far as I'm concerned. I've watched the way he relates to players, the way they go to battle for him, the way they swear by him. This guy is special, man. And I told y'all, and I say it affectionately, one of the biggest phonies in the world, because all of this stuff where he's acerbic and, you know, he doesn't want to talk to reporters during the games and all that stuff. Gregg Popovich is one of the most genuinely nicest guys you will ever encounter. He is a treasure and a tribute to this profession. The San Antonio Spurs are a first-class organization, and it is in large part because of him, who he is, what he stands for, and the consistency of his integrity and his approach to the game. He is special. But at the same time, I look at one of his mentors. I covered Larry Brown every day for 7 years. Larry Brown is one of the greatest coaches I have ever seen in my life. The difference between Larry Brown and Gregg Popovich is both positive and negative. Larry Brown was not as gifted as Gregg Popovich at being that relatable to players. He could pull it off with some, but there were always others who felt alienated, whereas with Gregg Popovich, you get the impression that everybody on the roster loves him, okay? Whereas with Gregg Popovich, he's a guy, you know, you look at Larry Brown, he's Mr. Fix-It. He's done more with less, better than any coach I've ever seen. Even though Gregg Popovich has done what he's done, he's always had Tim Duncan. For the most part, he's had Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker. Before that, he had Tim Duncan with David Robinson and those boys, Sean Elliott and Avery Johnson and those guys. So he had a crew. Larry Brown didn't always have that. Larry Brown never had that, actually, because even though Detroit won the title for him, he never had a Tim Duncan. So I look at that. I look at the greatness of Pat Riley. You know, I just see these guys. Of course, Doc Rivers is going to be mentioned up there. I look at Red Auerbach from the back in the days, and, you know, you got guys like that. Phil Jackson, how can you ignore him? 11 championships is 11 championships, and there's something to be said about if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Phil Jackson personifies that better than anybody. So if you're talking about accomplishments, Gregg Popovich, to me, is top 3. If you're talking about the greatest coach ever, it comes down to your category. And to me, I got to look at Phil Jackson for those 11 rings. I got to look at a Red Auerbach. But I also got to look at somebody like Larry Brown, you know, who Gregg Popovich, to some degree, learned from. It's not an accident that when Gregg Popovich won that championship in '99, the first game of the year, that next season, Larry Brown was coaching Philadelphia, and for the ring ceremony with San Antonio, and Gregg Popovich took his ring and walked over to the bench and sat next to Larry Brown and showed him the ring, because he knew that he had that man to thank for the greatness that he would ultimately display as a head coach, just like the Budenholzer and others will one day have Gregg Popovich to thank for the greatness that they may end up showing.
As much as I love my San Antonio Spurs, I must agree with you. The greatest all-around basketball coach ever is the man that Gregg Popovich coached under and learned under, Larry Brown, before Kerry was born in Los Angeles. Larry Brown took UCLA with 4 freshman starters and Kiki Vandeweghe to the national final. He took a 6th seed in Kansas to the national championship. And now, as you well know, he has SMU back on the verge of being a national power. I don't have time to go through the litany of turnarounds in the NBA that are just staggering, team after team after team. But there's a little gypsy going on here because, as you well know, Stephen A., you know him well, Larry can last about 3 years, and then either he burns out the organization or he burns out on the organization. Gregg Popovich, model of consistency, but he has had one of the great owners in the history of sports who stays in the shadows in Peter Holt. He has the best general manager in basketball, behind him, and R.C. Buford, who stole Tony Parker with the last pick in the first round, stole Manu Ginobili with the second-to-last pick in the second round, and stole Kawhi Leonard by trading George Hill for the 16th pick in the draft. And as you pointed out, Gregg Popovich, in his second year as a coach, Tim Duncan fell from heaven into his lap, and he's had him the whole way. One of the great quiet leaders in the history of sports. So the organization purrs along, and he's in the perfect spot. And I don't disagree with anything you said about him, although Pop drives me crazy from night to night occasionally. He is all-time great at weaving into his system the personalities that are given to him and the talent given to him by R.C. Buford. And I think Jerry West underestimates some of that talent sometimes, because there's still a lot of talent in San Antonio. So, again, all-time great. It's almost like, what's your flavor? You know, do you like the Larry Brown flavor, the fix-it flavor, or do you like the model of consistency?
Exactly. There's no definitive answer, Skip, but where you and I are in complete unison. Kerry, I can't express to you enough. I covered this man every day.
Yep.
Larry Brown, greatest coach I've ever seen. Yeah. I mean, this dude is on another level. Yeah. I mean, the Hubie Browns of the world, people like that have forgotten more basketball than we know. But I got to tell you, going to college, playing for Clarence Big House Gaines, his mentor, John McClendon, the great John McClendon, who all of these guys learned from, then covering John Chaney in college, then covering Larry Brown in the pros. My basketball resume speaks for itself in terms of the coaches that I have been absolutely godly blessed to be connected to. Larry Brown, I've never seen a coach like him in my life. This man is on another level. He truly is.